too many colleagues for incompetence or worse. Also, too many of Labour's policies about everything from welfare to tax to heinous child sex abuse by grooming gangs have been misguided. The biggest failure, though, has been by his choice, not cock-up. Starmer has repeatedly said he isn't interested in doing the vision thing of telling a simple, powerful story about the better Britain he wants to create. That's provided a golden opportunity for the great communicator of this age, Nigel Farage, who has that knack of reflecting back to millions of citizens their grievances about immigration or living standards or crime or diversity policies. Finally, though, and thanks to Farage, we may have had a glimpse of an authentic and even passionate Starmer in his decision to reframe the purpose of his government as the demolition of reform, which he describes as the battle of this era. It's not without risks. His denigration of Farage's determination to expel hundreds of thousands of migrants who've lived and worked here for years as immoral and racist sounds to many Farage supporters as a denigration of them as racist. If they take umbrage, they'll never vote for Starmer's Labour. But almost no one will vote for Labour if he can't, in simple language, describe the point of his government. And perhaps Farage has helped supply Starmer with much-needed ambition and mojo. This, therefore, is a convenient point to bring in Pippa in Liverpool. Pippa, tell us what we can expect from the PM's speech tomorrow.
Well, Robert, tonight the Prime Minister is thinking about what big messages he wants to land with the public in that speech. The battle with reform and the populist right, but also trying to deliver a more hopeful tone on the economy, despite the bleak outlook. And while his main focus is on the public, given his rocky start, he's also going to have to face down his internal critics. I spoke to Andy Burnham earlier. It doesn't look like there's going to be an imminent challenge, but it does give the Labour Party an idea of what an alternative leader might look like. So Keir Starmer will want to show the party tomorrow that he is still their man.
Thanks so much, Pippa. Now, the battle between Labour and Reform has become all-out war over the best approach to respond to concerns about immigration. As I already mentioned, Starmer has rediscovered why he's Prime Minister by laying into Reform's proposed abolition of migrants' rights after 5 years to apply for indefinite leave to remain in the country. Under Reform's plans, they would have to reapply to stay here every 5 years, and there would be much more onerous conditions for remaining, including a salary threshold thought to be around £60,000. This would bring the prospect of spouses and vulnerable people being expelled, which Starmer has called racist. But Labour, too, is making it much harder for economic migrants to stay here. The qualification time for permanent settlement would be doubled to 10 years. Applicants would have to speak English fluently, they couldn't be living on benefits, and they would have to give back to their communities by volunteering. Starmer may insist that Labour's clampdown would be less severe than Reform's, but the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, left no one in any doubt today that many Labour supporters will be made uncomfortable by her plans. So what does polling show about why all parties, including the Tories, are competing to be the toughest on migration? A survey done by Merlin Strategy breaks down different voters by whether they are socially and economically conservative or liberal. What's striking is that only two groups of voters, those down here, are currently in favour of relatively high levels of immigration or indeed measures to combat climate change. They are those who still define themselves as Labour supporters. They're a dwindling bunch, and those who've switched their allegiance to so-called more progressive parties like the Lib Dems and Greens. This explains why Mahmood is trying to make Labour credible on restricting immigration numbers, because she wants all these people up here to give Labour a hearing. But that may not be a rational policy, because this seemingly small green dot down here, the Labour switches to the likes of, as I say, the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, it's the big reason why Labour's poll rating has slumped. And these people won't be tempted back by a closed borders policy. Back to you, Pippa.
Emily, does this new stance on immigration chime with Labour values? How comfortable do you feel about it?
I don't think we need a closed borders policy, and I don't think it sounds like a closed borders policy. I think it sounds like it's really important to assimilate, and it's really important for our communities to stick together. So if you're a new migrant into the country, it is important that you learn English. And rather than find yourself isolated, it's a good idea if you are able to get involved in your community. And I mean, in my experience, certainly, when I've had people come to see me, when I've had people from the asylum hotels coming to see me, and they're doing voluntary work, their mental health is better, and they make many more connections within the community. And it helps them, but it also helps the community to understand who they are and what their place is, and it makes them more human.
And do you think it is just rhetoric, or is it? And do you hope that in practice it's maybe actually not that tough?
Well, I think there will obviously be lots of questions. So this question about, claiming no benefits. Now, does that mean in-work benefits? So if you're working, but if you're living in central London and you really can't make the rent because very few people can, ordinary working people, then is it right for you to be getting assistance with your rent? I don't really know what that will then mean. So there's lots of questions. There's lots of questions. I understand the principles, but it's just really a question of kind of how is it going to work in practice? But yeah, we should not be having a closed borders policy. I think that would, and we're not.
And Jeremy, does nobody want to make the positive case for immigration anymore?
Well, I make the positive case for immigration. I think that we benefit as a country when we attract the brightest and best from all over the world. But the reality is that the social contract, which has made us that kind of country for decades, even centuries, is now fraying really badly because voters are spooked by the fact that we are not controlling illegal migration. So I am very, very clear. We must sort out illegal migration. I think Shabana Mahmood's language will be far more likely to reassure those voters than Keir Starmer's. I think Keir Starmer's strategy is a strange one. He's basically saying, don't vote Reform because they're evil. But actually what those voters care about is success in controlling illegal migration. And they don't think Labour is delivering on that. They can see that in America it's gone down 90%, in the EU it's gone down 21%, but for us it's gone up a third. And that's what's bothering people.
And Emily, as a lawyer, what do you think the Home Secretary is referring to when she says she wants to question assumptions and legal constraints that have lasted for a generation?
Don't know. Let's wait and see. I think, but can I just pick up on what Jeremy said? Because I just think there's such a big gap, between what Reform is saying and I do think the need we can't have our borders completely out of control. That's, I think that kind of insecurity that people feel when they feel that there is no control at all over who comes in and who goes out of the country is a completely understandable emotion, and everybody surely in the country feels that. There's a difference between that and just being downright nasty to new migrants, which is what Reform want to do.
And do you think that she might have been referring to the European Convention of Human Rights and redrawing that in some way?
Maybe. Maybe, let's see. There's quite a lot of talk about that in lots of different countries, and the argument being that it was passed a long time ago, that the situation has now changed, and maybe that's an ambition which is worth certainly trying, but the difficulty always is that when you try to change many of these things, you just end up fraying such agreement as there is, and people sort of spill off in all different directions because there are lots of different aspirations when it comes to, let's change the European Convention on Human Rights.
Robert.
Thanks so much, Pippa. So, you won't be surprised that when I spoke to the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary David Lammy, I talked quite a lot about this whole migration issue. I began by asking him whether he was completely comfortable with the Home Secretary's tough new conditions when migrants apply for indefinite leave to remain in this country.
I think what the Home Secretary has announced today is really good news, because she is ensuring that those who have indefinite leave to remain, i.e. you've made your asylum claim, you can stay in the country, but you're on a path to citizenship, that is an earned citizenship. And she's talking about work, she's talking about national insurance contributions, she's talking about the ability to speak English well, she's talking about making a contribution to society. I do think that will chime with the general public.
You do speak often, and you did so again, actually, in The Observer at the weekend, of your pride at being the child of immigrants. And again, you pointed out, again at the weekend, that your dad left at the age of 12. Are you absolutely confident that if your new rules had been in place when you were a child, your family would have met these criteria about, you know, not being on benefits, making a contribution to the community and so on?
Well, actually, you know, if I'm thinking back to the Windrush generation, and that's not just, of course, those who came from the Caribbean, it's those who came from the wider, what was then the empire, India, Pakistan, Nigeria. They came, and boy, oh boy, did they make a contribution. They made a contribution in London Underground, in the railway system, in the National Health Service, which was built largely by those West Indian nurses that came.
I completely agree.
Actually,
but those people
citizenship
still,
was not
like all of us,
automatic when
fell
they
on hard
arrived.
times through no fault of their own. And I guess my question is, when a family falls on hard times for no fault of their own, are we confident that this system won't discriminate against them?
Oh, look, let's be absolutely clear. The Windrush generation were people who made an immense contribution to this country, who were then, people like my parents, who were then deported, detained, stripped of their right to work, stripped of their health care. And in fact, what I think Nigel Farage is now proposing is something similar, that he'll line you up. If you're from India, you go back. If you're from the Caribbean, you go back. If you're French, you can stay. That is something quite different to what the Home Secretary is proposing. It's wrong, it's immoral. It feels to me like the Windrush scandal all over again, and we should stand against it.
So you agree that, therefore, you know, you agree with the Prime Minister that reform's abolition, the way it's proposing to abolish indefinite leave to remain, is racist. But are those people, and, you know, there appear to be, you know, quite a lot of them, if they support the policy, are they racist?
I'm always keen to try to play the ball, not the man. And therefore, the ball in this instance is the policy. And the policy sounds racially discriminating to all with the same mind who are listening to it. And I think it's important when values guides my politics and the Labour Party's politics that we call it out for what it is. It's for the public then to make up their mind, but it's discriminatory, and we shouldn't do that.
But if it is racist, if it is discriminatory, I'm sorry to press you on this, but, you know, people will want to know, are you basically saying that if you're not a racist and you support it, you just don't understand the policy and therefore you're a bit thick?
I'm not getting into that. Look, I'm absolutely clear. If you've got no right to be in the country, you must be deported back to the country from which you came. As Foreign Secretary, I deported. That increase was 14%. 35,000 people left our country. I'm proud of that because people who shouldn't be here shouldn't be here. Having said that, if you have indefinite leave to remain, it's because your case has been processed and you have a right to be here. Citizenship is something else entirely. What Farage is saying is that you have no right to be here, even though your claim has been processed. Out you go, and worse than that, some people he'll kick out, the Indian, the Nigerian. Some people get to stay. I think he's saying the French, Europeans can stay. That is clearly discriminatory. And I'm going to call it what it is.
You know, you say you want to play the ball, not the man. In 2014, I don't know if you remember this, you did call Nigel Farage racist. Do you not stand by that now, then?
Look, that was 11 years ago. There's a lot of water under the bridge between now and then. I'm looking at the policy proposals he's putting forward today, examining them in depth today, holding them up to the light. I don't want to caricature him and obscure the implications of his policy proposal on a whole range of issues.
So he is not a racist anymore,
right up
just
to the
to be
next
clear.
general election.
But would you like to say he's not a racist, then?
I've said to you, Robert, that I'm concentrating on his policies. I think that is the way to go. Hold those up to the light. The personality stuff, in the end, in my experience, and I've been in politics 25 years, it doesn't really get you very far. It's about what his proposals are for the people of this country.
And then there's a couple of other things I need to move on to, but just finally on this issue of indefinite leave to remain, the Home Secretary said in her speech that she needed to question what she called the assumptions and legal constraints that have lasted for a generation in this area. of immigration. Do you know what she's referring to? Does she mean the European Convention on Human Rights?
I think she's joining a debate that they're having across European countries like Denmark, like Italy, like France, where they are looking at the way that people are using, for example, parts of Article 8 to claim right to a family life. And there is a debate now amongst European leaders and European Home Secretaries, Justice Secretaries, Foreign Ministers, about the articulation of the European Convention of Human Rights to meet today's challenges. And she's joining that debate, and I would want to work alongside her with that.
And, I mean, you're a lawyer. Keir Starmer is a lawyer. Some have said to me that actually if there's going to be reform of the European Convention on Human Rights, you're the right people to lead it.
Well, what I don't think is right is just wholesale pulling out of the European Convention of Human Rights. You know, it's bizarre that the party of Churchill is now proposing that. I say that because it would completely cut across the Good Friday Agreement and bring back the Troubles in Northern Ireland. But looking closely at the implications, the way that people may be playing the system, that is something that I'm quite willing to do with fellow justice ministers who are also raising these concerns when we come together.
Now, you immerse yourself as Foreign Secretary in the tragedy unfolding in Gaza. As you know, there is a possible plan, when there is a ceasefire and peace, for Tony Blair to go in as a, I don't know, kind of viceroy, a sort of interim governor of Gaza. Do you think that would be a good idea?
Tony did a lot of work right from the beginning on what would happen on the day after, and he was a little bit critical that there was so much focus on a ceasefire. No one would actually be able to solve this until they completely dealt with what happens in the governance of Gaza afterwards in order to get to that ceasefire. And I think he was right about that. Now, look, the Palestinian Authority's got to be part of the mix here, and there's got to be a transition to the Palestinian Authority. We're talking about the administration, we're talking about the governance, we're talking about the policing, we're talking about the rebuilding of Gaza. I think that's going to take a lot more than one individual. And I think it's probably got to include Palestinians and Arab states. I've seen Tony's name in the mix. Now, he may be one of many, but I think when you look at all that's got to be done, it's got to have some Palestinian, some Arab context to it, or it's not going to work.
I mean, it sounds like you're saying, though, you would be in favour of being part of that interim government. Finally, you...
Well, I'm very suspicious of the term viceroy. I don't think that going back to a mandate is going to work, Robert. I really don't.
Yeah,
I don't think that's what the Palestinian people want, or is in the interest of Israel.
No, that sounds completely rational to me. And then just finally, you praised Angela Rayner today. What is her way back to the front line of politics?
Oh, look, Angela Rayner is a woman in her 40s. She is going to continue to make a big contribution to the Labour movement in the years ahead. I have no doubt about that. I described her as a working class hero. She's a beacon for working class women across our country. She made a huge contribution on planning, a huge contribution on employment rights, and she will continue to play a role.
Back in the
I'll
cabinet?
let her articulate how she does that in the months ahead.
Back in the cabinet?
I could see Angela Rayner in a future cabinet, of course. I think people have tremendous sympathy for the situation she found herself in and the way that she sought to defend her son particularly.
Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy, very good to see you, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Now, you probably noticed that I said in that interview that somebody very clever had said to me that the perfect person as a lawyer to renegotiate the European Convention of Human Rights with other of our overseas partners was Keir Starmer. In fact, Jeremy Hunt has just reminded me that that very clever person was him, because it's in his latest book and we talked about it. Anyway, actually, I'm going to move on a bit from that, because since I spoke to the Deputy Prime Minister, we have had this announcement of what he's describing as a sort of historic peace settlement for Gaza, which he says he's agreed with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And I want to talk to both of you about this former Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, but also I'm just going to start with you, Emily, because you actually have come on the show saying that you were hopeful that Trump would be the person who could bring peace to Gaza. Do you think this is the big moment? Do you think Hamas will agree to this?
I'm glad you were listening. But yes, I did. I think I spoke about it in February. It's great news. Of course, it's great news. My God, we really need the killing to stop, and as soon as we can, the better. So I'm very pleased that if this is really true, that it's going to stop in 72 hours, then that's got to be a good thing. Now the question is, where do we go from there? But we need to have Trump involved, and I don't know if I said this to you, but I said it to other journalists, and I hope they were listening too. But during Trump and Starmer's conference, although everybody was kind of focused on, oh, Donald Trump doesn't agree with Keir Starmer recognising Palestine, I said, but listen, the most important thing was Keir Starmer said publicly that there were teams from Britain and teams from America that were working together to try to put together a peace process and to put more energy into the peace process. And if that is happening, that is very good news, because we have to involve the Americans, because that's the only way forward.
Jeremy, I mean, obviously, you've previously been involved in other intractable aspects of the tension between Hamas and the Israelis. We haven't yet heard from Hamas. Can we be confident that they would agree to this?
Well, we can't be confident, but as Emily says, we should certainly hope. I mean, the issue here is that there is, less than zero trust between Hamas and the Israelis. It's massively negative. I mean, the Israelis even tried to bomb Hamas negotiators recently when they were talking about a potential settlement. But I have to say that, obviously, I'm not someone who supported Tony Blair's government, but I think Tony Blair could make a very good contribution. He did a very good job in Northern Ireland of getting trust between two parties who had absolutely no time for each other. And I think in this case, the other thing that he could do is somehow you've got to get a stable peace in Gaza and a roadmap to a longer-term peace, which most of us have thought until now would be a two-state solution. Now, the Israelis are saying that is off the table, but somehow if we can find a pathway forward to a longer-term peace, well, I think that is something Blair could make a contribution towards.
And Emily, Tony Blair is somebody who divides your party. Do you think he is the right person to play quite a big role as a sort of governor of Gaza for maybe a few years?
I honestly don't care, Robert. What I care is what works. So if Tony Blair is the person that can bring people together, that can bring the Israelis on board, that the Palestinians can have trust in, that the Americans can have trust in, let's go for it. If he isn't, then they'll get somebody else. But in any event, it won't be one person. It will need to be a huge team, and it will need to be an international effort. And we need to make sure that Britain is absolutely at the forefront of it, as are the Americans, but as are many of our European and Arab partners. We need to make sure that there is a huge effort. There is so much to gain. Jeremy refers to Northern Ireland. Remember, everybody used to say that Northern Ireland was an impossible problem to solve until suddenly it wasn't. We can find a peace in Gaza, but we've really got to try. And we've got to believe that politics can find an answer.
Emily, Jeremy, I so much more I need to talk to both of you about after the break, when we will also be joined live from Liverpool by the favourite to be the new deputy leader of the Labour Party, Lucy Powell. And just before I go, I want to reassure Emily that I hang on her every word. She doesn't have to be surprised that I remember what she said. See you in a minute. So welcome to the famous Twitter break, #Peston. Now, I haven't a clue what we're talking about. It says place your bets, and I think what we've got to do here, Jeremy, is we've got a range of possible positions, policies for this government to sort of take, and I think we've got to rank them in terms of what's most likely to happen before the next general election. So I don't know what HS2 means. It's obviously not going to be completed anytime soon. Maybe it means it's not going to be scrapped. Who knows? Digital ID cards, we know what that means. They've already promised them. So I am actually quite interested in whether you think there's any chance that we'll all have one before the election. Then we've got rejoining the EU. I don't think that's going to happen before the election. And then them scrapping the two-child benefit cap. So which of these is the most likely, in your view, and the least likely?
I think the least likely definitely is rejoining the EU. I think that's off the table. I'm not quite sure if that's scrapping HS2 or extending it or whatever, but I think HS2 will still be being built.
Right.
I think we will have digital ID cards, and I think that's...
So you don't think the technical challenge is that great? Because the history of governments doing things like this is pretty terrible.
It's true, but I don't think it's that complicated, and lots of other countries have done it. And this one, two-child benefit cap, my goodness
£3.5
me,
billion cost.
What a waste of money. And it's going to make poverty worse. I really
Why do you think it's going to make poverty worse?
Because you're going to get more and more very large families on benefits, and they're going to be stuck in poverty.
Do you really think it's an incentive for people to have...
I think it's a total mistake, and I think it'll be very unpopular with the electorate. But we may
It is true, we've done polling on this, that actually voters don't like scrapping it. But there are quite a lot of economists who say it's the single most important thing they could do to reduce poverty, but you think only in the short term,
Robert,
you think longer term.
Evil Tories were here for 14 years. We reduced absolute poverty by over 1 million by getting people into work.
Well, relative poverty went up, and relative poverty also matters, as you know. Now, we're going to look at another screen very briefly. No, we're not. Apparently, we're not going to look at another screen. Hang on, perhaps it goes this way. Oh, there we are. So, this is a very odd placing your bets, because this is about who's going to be leading parties at the next election. It doesn't include Keir Starmer. I think most of us would say there's a fair chance he's going to lead it. But of these, who do you think will be head of a party at the next election?
Well, I think that Kemi's share price is low. This is the time to buy Kemi shares.
You're going to buy Kemi?
I think Ed Davey is going to be there. Farage is going to be there. As for Labour, look, I think Keir Starmer's got a long time to turn things around. And when you're number 10, he's backs against the wall, but he's also got all the cards.
And he's a fighter. So, as you say, probably unwise to write him off now. So that's it for now, and back to the programme. Welcome back. Now, we are going to talk elections and elections for leaders and deputy leaders. And one thing that has gone right for Starmer is that the so-called King of the North, Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester, he went into the conference making his case, many would say, to replace Starmer as Prime Minister sooner rather than later. But in the face of criticism throughout the conference, I encountered a bit of it, that he's been a bit too disloyal. He said today that Starmer is the right person to lead Labour and the country. Even so, exclusive polling from Labour List and Survation shows that among Labour members, Burnham is massively more popular than other potential leadership candidates. And poor old Wes over here, for years people thought he was the favourite to succeed, but he obviously needs to spend a bit more time schmoozing local party members. If there won't be a leadership contest this side of May's local and national elections, there is an important competition going on to choose Angela Rayner's successor as deputy leader. We told you last week that Lucy Powell, who was sacked from the government by Keir Starmer, was well ahead of his preferred candidate, the Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson. Well, Labour List and Survation have done a second survey of Labour members, and Powell has extended her lead, you can see here, to more than 30 percentage points. There's still weeks to go, but Labour members are clearly signalling that they want the new deputy leader to put pressure on Starmer to do what they want rather than them taking orders from him. And Lucy is with Pippa right now.
That's so interesting, Robert. I've got just the person here. Lucy, you're obviously running for the deputy leadership after having left the cabinet. And you said you wouldn't be chucking rocks at the government. But isn't that exactly what Labour members will want you to do?
No, I think Labour members want us to be more successful. They want us to be a better government, because clearly things haven't been going all that well when you look at the polls. There's no sugarcoating of that, and we've made mistakes through the last year and they've taken away from the many good things that we've been doing. So I think party members and the public actually want us to be a better version of ourselves, to give a better account of ourselves. Who are we governing for, and why are we doing what we're doing, and what is the purpose of this Labour government? And I think I can help with that, and that's what I think Labour Party members want. And if that means, at times, speaking truth to power, having the difficult conversations, ideally in private, you know, as part of the family, so that we can get a course correction, then I will do that, and I think that's what members want as well.
Now, your rival for the job, Bridget Phillipson, said that she thought it might be a risk to the stability of the party having a deputy leader outside of the cabinet. Do you agree?
No, absolutely not. You know, look, this is a party role. This is a role that people are elected by the members. It always has been, it always will be. The leader and the deputy leader are elected by members. We're not appointed. The deputy leader is not appointed by the Prime Minister, and it's a chance for members to have their say. And actually, I think there's a real value added that I can bring now, in addition to the Cabinet, having this political role outside of Cabinet, but working alongside Cabinet, bringing the politics into the conversation at all turns, keeping us connected with our communities, keeping us connected with our members, and having that bridge to the party membership full time, because this isn't going to be someone who is Deputy Prime Minister. Neither Bridget or I are going to be Deputy Prime Minister. We're going to be the elected leader of the deputy leader, rather, of the Labour Party, and that is not a role that government recognises. So it is a party role.
Now, everybody I speak to here in Liverpool, from the Prime Minister down, refers to Nigel Farage's immigration policy as racist, but don't sort of want to call the people who support them racist. How does that work?
Well, look, I think that's everyone's saying the same thing, aren't they? I think, you know, targeting people who are in this country legally and fairly, who've come here in good faith and have, you know, contributed to this country. The idea that we would deport them, round them up and deport them, is racist, because we're targeting, you know, immigrants. And, you know, what I've been saying this week is that we really need to wrest back from Nigel Farage and his ilk, this political megaphone, because he's been setting the terms of debate.
What about the people that are backing him then? Are they being manipulated? No,
look, I think Nigel Farage has been sort of trying to make the weather, hasn't he? And I think he's done that successfully, because we've ceded the debate to him. I'm sure most of the people that are supporting Nigel Farage and reform don't know about individual policies. We've got to call out Nigel Farage, but also I think what I'm hearing loud and clear is people want to know, what are we doing? What's the Labour Party? What's the Labour government doing? Who are we doing it for? They don't want us to keep going on about Nigel Farage either, actually. They want us to set out much more clearly what is our agenda and what are we doing to fix the problems the country faces.
And one of the problems the country faces is obviously child poverty, and both you and Bridget Phillipson think that the 2-child limit has to go. But polling suggests that the British public is actually in favour of it. Is that a problem?
No, I don't think it's a problem, because, look, I think we've got to be much clearer about who we stand for in this country and in whose interests are we governing. And people are not seeing that clearly enough from us. And addressing child poverty and helping some of the most vulnerable in our society, those who are struggling to get by, that is to the core of what any Labour government should be about. So that's why I've been saying all along, we've got to be much clearer that we are in favour of a policy that's going to address that.
Now, you were Leader of the House of Commons when Keir Starmer's welfare reforms fell apart. Pat McFadden, the Welfare Secretary, seems to want to come back for more cuts. Will the party wear that?
It depends in what form they're done. Look, I think we've absolutely got to learn the lessons of what happened with the welfare bill. We made proposals that weren't fully thought through. We were trying to kind of rush them along. They were done, or they were seeming to be done, on the basis of needing to make cuts, not on the basis for delivering better outcomes and reforming the system. The system does need reform, but you've got to take people with you. When you're doing wholesale reform like that, you've got to do it carefully, you've got to do it slowly, and take people with you and build consensus. And the devil's always in the detail. So that's why, one of the things that I'll be doing, as I've done before, being the sort of shop steward of the backbenches for the last year or so, is making sure that we're taking elected representatives, Parliament with us on these kind of issues.
Now, we saw on Screeny about Andy Burnham and how popular he is amongst the members. He seems to have backtracked a bit today and says that Keir Starmer is now the best person to be Prime Minister. Does Keir Starmer need to offer more hope? And are you 100% confident that he will lead the party into the next election?
Well, I really hope he does. Look, we were elected only 15 months ago on a mandate of change, and he was elected as our Prime Minister. But one of the things that I think everyone's crying out for is that we've got this broad movement, which is one of our great strengths, is that we draw on the talents right across our movement, including Andy Burnham, who is an incredibly talented politician. We draw on all the talents across our movement. I think that will make us make better decisions. It will give a clearer sense of who we are and who we're governing for. And I think as Deputy Leader, I can bring that to the table in service of this Labour government and Keir Starmer Prime Minister, because I want us to be a better version of ourselves and a more successful government.
Lucy, thank you. Robert.
Yeah, fascinating. I'm absolutely certain that Keir Starmer is looking forward to having the self-described shop steward as his deputy. Jeremy, we've had a remarkable few days where people have said this conference was make or break for Keir Starmer, and he's plainly got an important speech to make tomorrow. But we've got the Conservative conference next week. Some people are saying that's make or break for Kemi Badenoch. Is it as big a moment for her as they say?
I don't think so. I don't detect any mood inside the Conservative Party to have our fifth leader in 4 years. I think people know that we need to give Kemi time. And
how much time do you think? Because we're still waiting for a lot of the important big pillars of policy.
Yes, but remember, just over a year ago, we had the worst defeat in our history. And the country are not going to rush back and say we got it wrong in a year. And what we need to do is what all opposition parties do in our system when it's working well, which is come up with solutions to the big problems that we face. And at the moment, we haven't had that from Labour. That's why, as Lucy was rightly saying, they've lost a lot of support in the polls. And I think as Kemi starts to do that, we will get back in the race.
I don't know, is Emily with us? Because there was... OK, well, before we go to Emily, as an outside observer, and I don't know if you can be dispassionate about this, but do you think Labour should think about replacing Starmer?
My own view is that, Starmer is a decent man, but he is really struggling. And I actually don't think it is just about the vision thing, which is what you talked about at the top of the show. I think the real issue is that he was elected to sort out problems in the economy and on small boats, and neither has happened. People don't see the big issues really being tackled. And I think that I listened to Rachel Reeves' speech today, and I felt it was more an argument to the party faithful that she's not another Tory austerity chancellor, rather than an argument to the country about the big decisions that she has in the budget. And I think there's one very big strategic choice that Labour has to make. Do they do welfare reform, which, if they got the welfare bill down to 2019 levels, would save about £47 billion a year? Or are they prepared to come back year in, year out with more tax rises that could stifle economic growth? And I think that what I was expecting was some kind of sense as to which way they were going to go, and I left none the wiser.
Well, we're going to come back to the whole tax question after the next break. But, Emily, I'm delighted that you are back with us. Just on Andy Burnham, the consensus of people I've spoken to, so-called King of the North, is that a sort of gentle signalling of his ambitions would have been the right thing, but he overplayed his hand and you know, there's a sort of sense that he was a bit too aggressive in showing that he wants to succeed. What's your view?
I kind of feel that Andy will be Andy. You know, he kind of warmed to his theme and perhaps should have stopped a bit earlier. But you know, there we are. I mean, he's doing a good job as Mayor of Manchester and presumably will remain Mayor of Manchester for some time and continue to do a good job.
Do you think he may be Labour leader one day?
I think probably not.
But then this issue of how safe Keir Starmer is. First of all, how important is the speech tomorrow?
Oh, I think it is important. I think it's important that I think he has. I mean, obviously he has two audiences, and it's important to remember them both. I think that the party faithful comes to this conference wanting to be enthused and wanting to hear the message and why it is we're in politics and what we're trying to achieve and hear from the heart what it is that Labour is about. And that is very important. It pulls it together, it inspires us, and I know that if Keir is himself, he will be able to do that.
But what about the country? Because Jeremy's point is that Rachel, he feels, didn't reach out to the country. How important is it that the Prime Minister does?
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Jeremy was saying was a lot of nonsense. I think that she did reach out to the country too. I mean, I wasn't in the hall to hear her speech, but I did hear her on the media round. I did hear her on the Today programme, and I heard her speak with a passion and a commitment to doing the right thing and to leading the country in the right way that I thought was very impressive, actually. I mean, really very impressive. So, you know, she's... so I think that if we can hear a bit more... I mean, you know, I do think, you know I think this. I think that, you know, if people say what they mean and mean what they say, there is an authenticity to them and people know that they're speaking a truth, and that's what we need to be doing. We need to be a bit more confident about ourselves, a bit more Labour, and go for it.
And a bit more authentic, Emily, obviously. Now, don't go away, because after the break, we will be talking about one of the most important budgets of our time. We thought last year's was important. This one could be even more important, and I'll be talking it over with a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. You can't afford to miss it. See you in a second.
Welcome to the break. Now, tonight we're going to be speaking about conferences past, Emily, from Neil Kinnock falling into the sea to Theresa May's cough. Keir Starmer covered in glitter to Liz Truss. What was it? Pork markets, cheese,
Yes,
can't remember.
yes.
I've been covering conferences for, oh, it's too long to think, more than 20 years I've been coming to these things. But which moments stick out to you as the most memorable from the past conferences?
If I'm really honest, a speech I made.
How was that?
I did a speech about standing up to racists and about what happened in Liverpool and how they stopped the fascists and about what happened in Spain and how the crowds came out and called out "No pasará," and it was, and actually. The crowd in the hall knew where I was going and started singing in advance of my getting there. So for me, that was like when a speech goes well, it's like flying, you know, and that was a great opportunity for me to talk about something I feel very strongly about and, you know, bringing the hall with me. That's the honest truth.
Particularly long-standing ovation, I'm sure. And what year stands out as a high and what was your low? The Labour Party's low at conference?
Well, the awful one was that one that was, is it 2019, wasn't it? When I think I was on stage in the middle of in conversation with Ant Menon, and the result of the court decision about the proroguing of Parliament came in. Right, and we had
Brexit.
to, on Brexit, and I had to And there were lawyers in the room, like, standing up and reading from their phones about what was in the judgment and asking me what I thought. So, first of all, like, I hadn't had time to process it. But secondly, we had to pack up our bags and we had to go, straight back. We gave up on the conference and we just all went home.
And then, very quickly, what people might not know about you is that you have a secret life as a DJ at party conference. Tell us about that quickly.
Well, I am tonight DJing, as you can see.
What are you going to be playing?
Oh, no, you'll have to come. You'll have to come, and then you'll find out.
Have to report back next week. Thank you, Emily.
Welcome back. Now, I reported a few days ago that the Chancellor is facing a 30 billion hole in the budget. We've got this huge, actually way more important than these party conferences we're going through. The biggest event of the autumn will be this budget. So there we are. We can see that she's going to have to raise £30 billion in taxes because she's basically ruled out spending cuts. You talked earlier about the importance of welfare cuts. They can't do those until after they get the Timms report. What's it like, weeks before a budget, trying to think through how on earth you raise that kind of money? And I know you don't want to raise taxes, but if you had to raise taxes, which are the ones she should be looking at?
Well, the first thing is, it is really difficult, and I don't envy Rachel Reeves's position because she made a big gamble that things might move in her direction, and they've actually moved against her, and that happens to any chancellors. It's nothing to do with.
And she didn't have a cushion of any size, did she?
No.
The so-called headroom was nothing.
No, and so it is a very, very difficult position that she finds herself in.
And can I just ask you, do you feel any sympathy for the fact that the OBR didn't review the productivity outlook last year? Because the big contributor to this hole is that they have decided the economy productivity is growing slower than they thought. They could have made this judgment a year ago.
They could have, but it's also the way that the bond yields have gone up, and that's meant the cost of debt interest is going to be higher. I think it's just very difficult. That said, I think in this situation, what we haven't heard from her, and I hope we do start to hear, is what is her plan for growth? Because what people want to know is how are we going to get out of this? How are we going to get back to the 2% plus growth that we were getting before the financial crisis instead of, hobbling along at 1%?
But given, obviously we all agree growth has got to come up. What would be the least sort of growth flattening taxes she could look at?
Well, I don't think she should be raising taxes, as you correctly predicted. In fact, you can see on this graph here, I made a valiant effort.
Yeah, well, some would say you gave away money you didn't have. Those, the national insurance cuts definitely contributed to the problem she inherited.
The OBR said that they met the fiscal rules, so I don't agree with that. But my point is...
Though you also had minuscule...
What I did was, I believe by cutting national insurance, we would grow the economy, and the OBR backed that up. And I think if you look around the world...
Right. Well, let's then, in which case, let's then look at your productivity record, because, as I showed you earlier on today, productivity in the UK has been lamentable since the financial crisis. It's grown way less than in America, but way less than the average of all rich countries. And that happened on your government's watch. Why couldn't you fix it?
Well, actually, I did a lot of things, but they do take time to feed through. What I did was perhaps my biggest single tax cut, which was something called full expensing, which gives businesses a big tax break on what they invest in plant and machinery. And that was to encourage them to invest. Now, unfortunately, I don't want to get into trading blows with Rachel because she does have a difficult job, but the rise in employers' national insurance discouraged them from making exactly the investments we need.
But they are doing other things you would approve of, like reforming planning restrictions, like trying to make regulation less onerous. And as you yourself pointed out, it does take a while for this stuff to feed through.
It does. And the issue you've got, when you're getting that growth rate up to 2% plus, what do you do in the 5 years or so that it takes for those policies to feed through? And the only game in town, which happens to be very good for growth, very good for the economy, is welfare reform. And that's why I think if I was in her shoes now, And what I was hoping to hear today, maybe we'll hear it from Keir Starmer tomorrow, is a big argument, not that we need to cut welfare to save money, but that actually getting people off welfare into work is good for the individuals. At the moment, we are signing off 1,000 people every single day, and we're saying they don't even have to look for work. A lot of these people have mental illness. It'd be far better for their anxiety and their depression if they were in the world of work, but we're signing them off work. And
well, look, in fairness to the government, they did announce today a scheme whereby, you know, the million young people who are neither in education or work will be subsidised to get jobs, which is a sort of step in the right direction.
It is tinkering. And in the end, if we got the welfare bill down to pre-pandemic levels, we would save enough to avoid any tax rises.
You did say that earlier, and I just want to bring in Pippa for a second, because, I mean, you and I have both been talking to members of the Cabinet and senior people in Labour about this budget, and even though this conference is important, they are saying the budget is probably more important.
Absolutely. They say it's critical. And I've been speaking to senior Downing Street people here who say that while they're focused on party conference and everything they need to do, the message they need to deliver to the country and their party, they are much more focused. In fact, it's keeping them up at night, worrying about the budget, how they're going to address the really tough economic backdrop that they face, which taxes they're going to have to put up. Lots of speculation here about which ones they will do, whether they'll be able to stick with the manifesto pledges, not to put up those 3 taxes on working people. A lot of uncertainty about that. And, you know, when we go off air, Robert, I'm going to be going back down to the bar to see what else I can find out.
Jeremy, out of interest, do you think if they hadn't made those pledges on income tax and VAT, they would have still won the election?
Good question. I think they probably would have, because we had kind of come to the end of the runway after 14 years, and it has boxed them in. But I think the big call is, you know, countries with lower taxes grow faster. Do you buy that or not?
Jeremy, we're going to have this conversation, I know, many times again. That's it. If you've been tempted to feel sorry for Starmer and his woes, you'll have been weeping for the Tory reader, Kemi Badenoch. In next week's show, during Tory party conference, we'll assess whether she's a political Lazarus or a Norwegian blue dead parrot. See you then. Goodbye.